There's now a way to contact the Wolf Connection podcast. Send us an email to podcast@wolfconnection.org with your comments, questions, and guest ideas for Stephen and myself. You may hear your question answered on an upcoming podcast. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Calfa. Let's talk about some wolves. Really a pleasure to have another member of the Wolf Conservation Center, the head honcho, the executive director since roughly 2013, Maggie Howell, joining us from South Salem, New York. Maggie, so happy that we fought through some internet issues. We got here. Hopefully it stabilizes, but how are you doing over there on the East Coast?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And this has been at the behest of actually our PAC services manager, Elena, because she followed, we all follow you, the Wolf Conservation Center. And she goes, she forwarded this to Stephen and I and said, you should probably have Maggie on. And we go, yeah, that's probably not a bad idea. So we spoke with Regan Downey, and she really gave a great introduction to Wolf Conservation Center. But just tell everybody your background. How did you get into wildlife conservation? Because I know you came from a different path and now you're on this one.
Yeah. So I grew up in New York City. And so especially back when I was a kid, there wasn't a lot of wildlife. It seems like things have gotten a little bit more wild there now, with coyotes and hawks and all sorts of things. But when I was a kid, I was really just reading books and looking at movies and TV and looking at all these like iconic predators from around the globe, and just fell in love with them. And so really thought that, that's what I wanted to do. But also knew that was going to be hard to do from New York, because I was your typical New York City person that thought the world ended at the boundaries of the island, right? So I figured, well, I'll look at veterinary medicine. And so I went to school and thought I was going to be a doctor, and found out I have no interest in medicine, just beasts. So really went back, graduated and went back to the city, had to figure out if I really, if I was willing to leave the city. And I decided after a very short stint in a job where I could pay off some loans to go out west and to just try to find a way to get my foot in the door. That's
awesome. So when did you, and so this basically came about just sort of a natural, it seems like a natural progression that you were just sort of, were you fed up with city life? Was it something that was calling to you? Did you have an experience? What was the main thing? I know you said you went through veterinary and stuff like that, but was there a specific point where you said, this is the path?
I think it was when everyone where I worked, it was like in finance, and everyone realized that looking at me with my like quadruple monitors at my desk, and I just had animal pictures all over them. They're like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I don't know. And so that was really it. It was kind of like a quarter life crisis. And really, even when I was a kid, though, I was always just looking, like I said, I didn't know how I was going to be with animals, but I knew I wanted to do something. So I was much more of like an animal activist as a kid, and which you could do from the city, right? But then when it came to actual career, it was a little harder. I think nowadays it might be a little bit easier. But luckily when I went out west, I had a chance just to, in captivity, be introduced to some different species, and eventually the wolf, which was totally off my radar. So it was a very long, kind of not really straightforward path, but it got me here.
Yeah, I think you were about to mention it, but what kind of bottlenecked this passion for animals into a very specific passion for wolves?
I was actually working mostly with large cats, to tell you the truth. And they were fascinating. I fell in love with these individual, creatures. And then when I was introduced to wolves, a lot of the people, I had a small group of people we were working with, and they're all male. And I was kind of I was also the weirdo. I was from New York City. And I was just like, oh, I like these wolves a lot. And I just spent time with them and then realized like, oh my gosh, I I don't know, they were someone to talk to. I know it sounds so weird, which doesn't translate with conserving them or preserving them in the wild, but just falling in love with a few individuals really opened my eyes. And then I found out that, whoa, I don't have to look at Africa or South America to really think about these amazing animals. They're right here in our country. And that was really right, just a couple of years after the Yellowstone introduction. And I was in the Southwest at the time, and the Mexican gray wolf reintroduction was just getting going. So it was really exciting time, and kind of the perfect time to be bitten by like the wolf bug.
I mean, I hear you when you say you were having conversations with them, because we as we were just spitballing before we started, that's a lot of what happens. I don't want to say it happens at Wolf Connection, but there are those relationships where I go over to certain wolves and I just sort of sit and be with them, and I have like my own energetic conversation, and I sit with them and I be with them, and it really settles me sometimes with a lot of things that are going on in my own life. So I can totally relate to that. So for you, you see all this introduction happen. You clearly, it sounds like then you were shot out of a cannon, you're ready to go. What made your way? So you made your way back east then, because you went west for a little bit. You come back and you were at the Northeast Wolf Coalition. What was that organization about, and what was your role there? If you can go into that.
Yeah, so that's actually was while I was at the Wolf Center. So, what brought me back to the East was just knowing I had to do more than kind of take care of animals in captivity and teach people about them. And it was probably by seeing these efforts happening in our country. So I went back, found out there was the Wolf Center there, which I couldn't believe because it's an hour, north of where I grew up. So I was like, gosh, I went the roundabout way to get here. But the Northeast Wolf Coalition is something that we pulled together the beginning of 2014. And it was when then, I guess, under Secretary of Interior Sally Jewell, there was, the proposal to remove protections from wolves nationwide. So I think, history repeats itself. And just kind of seeing what this meant to the Northeast specifically, which is something that is not often talked about, is just that, in areas where wolves have yet to have a chance to recover, or maybe just little hints that they could be recovering, places like in California or Colorado, the Southern Rockies or the Northeast, that this could really be a deal breaker and really not allow even natural recovery to ever happen. And at the time, there had been some indications that wolves had made it over across the border from Canada into the Northeast region. Unfortunately, though, because we have pretty liberal coyote hunting throughout the Northeast, they were often mistaken for coyotes, and that was the only way we would even know that wolves had actually crossed into our region. So we really wanted to bring, kind of the scientific, the academic community, residents, organizations, people that we'd never really worked with because they're not really the wolf organizations. So it was a really cool experience to kind of meet new people and collaborate. And just to kind of all get together and try to, even with across the border too, have this transboundary kind of connection to work on the local level for education and also on all the state levels to try to get protections for wolves if that federal level of protection was in fact removed. So with this latest delisting, which was announced at the end of 2020, luckily, it has now been reversed via court order. But yeah, it's deja vu all over again, right? So, and still that important work, even though the Northeast Wolf Coalition isn't very active right now, there's still a desperate need for it. And really that's what's going to take. We got lucky as we have that judges agree that delisting is not the way to go, at least nationwide. But it really comes down to the state level. And that's now what we see with the wolf population that continues to be in peril in the Northern Rockies. It's really the states that have to be worked with, and definitely education too.
So what is your job? And we'll get into the WCC in just a minute. So what was your what was the information that you were trying to spread, or that you were trying to do in your early on before you really became entrenched in the Wolf Conservation Center? Were you working at the state level? Like you said, you were going, cross boundary to Canada. What was the temperature like, especially in the Northeast? Because we're all of us are from there, or Stephen and I are from there originally, and now in the West. But I mean, typically it's, as you know, as a lot of us know, New York, Connecticut, sort of that Northeast mentality is very, we say what we want, we're going to go and get it, and we do it. So was that typical of the people you were dealing with, and that you were in this coalition? What was sort of the temperature of the people working for this type of an issue?
Yeah, it was varied. I think probably the biggest bone of contention would have been whether we were really looking to have wolves naturally recolonize and try to set the groundwork for that, which would require education, hunter education, or really pushing for some sort of reintroduction effort. And so I guess it was a matter of patience with both of those scenarios, and also politics, right? So really, but people at the end of the day, everyone involved with this effort knew that the landscape in the Northeast, especially in Maine and like the Adirondacks, was screaming for a predator like the wolf, or even the cougar. The eastern cougar was announced to be extinct a couple of years ago, and since then we've had one, I think, confirmed that was unfortunately killed on the Merritt Parkway in Connecticut. After making it down like through Nebraska, and it went up in Canada. Really amazing trek. And it's just like, oh gosh, you made it so far. But even if they do make it here, in order to actually successfully recolonize, of course, you're going to have to reproduce. And that's really the kicker. So you have to have a couple traveling together, or you're going to have just some lone wolf or cougar or what have you come looking for a mate and probably not find one. So I understand when people being impatient, but I also understand in terms of tolerance and just kind of getting the support of like some of the state agencies and some of the communities. Sometimes it's a little easier to go more of the natural route.
We don't get a chance often, John, to talk about the East Coast. Actually, are there any active wolf reintroduction plans happening on the East Coast? I thought there was like a red wolf plan for North Carolina or something like that. Is that something you know of? Are there any plans for possible reintroductions further east than Michigan?
Well, right now, nothing in the Northeast. Back in, I want to say 1999, there was like some talk, and it was probably just following the heels of Yellowstone, to restore the eastern wolf to the Northeast, and they did some surveys, some I guess some popular attitude surveys, but also just looking at the landscape. But it didn't really go much further than that. But down to the south in North Carolina, we do have an active red wolf program right now where they're being reintroduced. For a while, it was stagnant. It was almost put on hold, which was terrifying because we were just watching this population just plummet from, was thought to be as high as 150 at one point, and today it's 12. It got as far down as 7, I think, at one point.
And what was causing the mortality?
There was a very small but vocal community that opposed the whole reintroduction and recovery effort. And the state agency was pressured the U.S. Fish and Wildlife to kind of do an assessment. So they put everything on hold to decide whether it was working, if it was something they were going to end altogether and render the red wolf extinct in the wild, or actually try to boost. And at the same time, people were questioning the genetic integrity of the red wolf. Is it really a distinct species? So that was always kind of a go-to, like, well, we should be saving them anyway. But since then, there has been it's been confirmed they are distinct species, but it was really, I mean, just neglect. I would say on U.S. Fish and Wildlife's part at the time. Thankfully, and their hands were tied in a lot of ways. But thankfully, they're really recommitted now. First, it was via court order where they reintroduced 2 pairs and also did a pup cross foster last spring and summer. And now they really just came out of the gate, like just definitely, it gives us a lot of hope. Definitely we lost a lot and we're kind of starting from scratch, which isn't easy, but at least there is some hope that this species can once again have their paws on the ground.
So with Wolf Conservation Center, are you guys part of the red wolf reintroduction process? I believe you are, right? And a couple of others.
Yep. So we definitely teach about wolves. You met Regan, who's our excellent director of education, and our wolf encyclopedia. But we do a lot of education. We participate in 2 species survival plans. So I guess endangered wolf recovery plans. One would be for the red wolf, the other for the Mexican gray wolf. And then we also do a lot of advocacy and we fund research as well.
If you were to have a bird's eye view of the property, what does your layout look like? What's your kind of system? What are your methods for organizing animals and facilities, et cetera?
So we're in a kind of strange location for a wolf conservation center. And that's because it's a very residential area. It's a beautiful area. It does not feel like it's an hour away from New York City at all. It's very rural, lots of horses, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
But it is kind of weird to have a bunch of wolves there too. But it works for us and it works for our neighbors and our community. They love us. So, but basically we're set up so we have a very small education building, and when people want to visit us, they're required to sign up to an existing program. So we're not a walkthrough where you can just go see wolves.
Right.
Just sit down. We're going to teach you about wolves. We're going to teach you why you're going to see these wolves and not certain other wolves. And really the status of them in the United States. Try to diffuse any fears or myths around wolves, and then you can have a chance to go up and meet some of our wolves. And it definitely gives people, I think, a better appreciation and understanding of what we're doing there. Mm-hmm. But most of our land is actually dedicated to the wolves.
To their habitat.
10 enclosures. They're all about, I think the largest enclosure is almost 3 acres.
How many wolves are in our 3-acre habitat?
10. So we have one group of wolves that we call our educators, or our ambassadors. And there's three animals. And we really try to limit really the number of wolves we have in that capacity, because ultimately wolves belong in the wild.
Right.
And these are wolves that have no chance of being released to the wild. Their job is just to inspire, to educate, and to foster some sort of connection with our visitors. Mm. And so, that's something we're also going to have to reassess. And we do it often, just making sure, are they accomplishing their goal? Right. Not to put the pressure on them. We have some work to do as well. But, is their purpose, is that, because we really, again, it's kind of hard. It's an inner battle with us. The other wolves, most of them actually live off exhibit. So when people come and see us, right now we have 32 wolves. They have the opportunity to see our 3 education wolves, Zephyr, Alewa, and Nakai. But they might see a pair of red wolves and they might see a pair of Mexican wolves because they are a lot more elusive. But it's kind of a ripoff if we have 32. So that's one of the reasons it's good to talk to them first as well. Most of the wolves we keep off exhibit just to safeguard their elusive behavior, right. To make them better release candidates. Yeah. So all of our wolves, they're going to get, a really specific diet. They get whole carcass roadkill deer. Wow. And that way they have very natural interactions over the food. Also, it's what they're naturally be eating. But then for those wolves that get that ultimate, opportunity to live on the wild landscape, they're going to recognize what's appropriate to eat and what's not. So our ambassadors, right. They sometimes get other stuff too. they don't need to know what's appropriate. So they get a lot of crazy stuff that like Whole Foods gives us. But
how does that deer program work? How do you acquire the deer? How do they end up at your facility?
Well, there are a lot of deer in the Northeast, as you probably know.
Yep.
And a lot of them get hit by cars. And so the highway department's very supportive, and they'll let us know. Also, just the police and just community in general is just like, can you get this dead deer out of our street?
Wow.
And we're like, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir. And we actually even had some support. And actually, I don't even think they'd ever been to visit the Wolf Center. This is years ago. But that all of a sudden they drove up our hill and we're like, oh, no, sorry, we're closed. You have to register for a program. I'm like, oh, no. And they opened the back of their Subaru and there was a dead deer. And I was like, you picked up the deer on the road. We would have picked it up for you. But, we were really, I think we gave them a calendar or something because we're really thankful. Oh, but yeah, it's a great free resource, but it's also, stressful because it's not really something you can control. And often it's something where you have a lot of deer getting hit by cars in the fall. Mm-hmm. And then you might have really none. So we have to have a lot of freezer space, right. Just so we can really stock up and wait for that dry season. But something that was interesting during the first month or two of lockdown with COVID, no one was on the roads in New York.
Wow.
And so good for the deer, right? And sure. All wildlife. I mean, gosh, I'm really happy for them. But all of a sudden we're like, oh no, what are we going to feed the wolves? And of course we had some reserve, but we were a bit concerned. But some local restaurant, they actually brought us a whole bunch of fish. And it did it in a pinch. So we're really thankful that really the community was thinking not only of themselves during such a kind of scary time, but also about our wolves. So
yeah, what's the decision-making process to decide whether certain animals are going to be part of your release program and what animals stay and take their place in the program? Yeah,
so basically, the whole captive population is kind of under the umbrella of the AZA, so the Zoo Association. So all this network of a lot of zoos and a few people a little bit more similar to us who are not zoos participate. And all of these animals are officially owned by Americans. So right. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Yeah. So it's definitely, so what, the way you work with them or care for them, definitely there's really pretty strict protocols, which as there should be, just to make sure that we are equipping them with the best, kind of tools if they do get that chance to live in the wild. But so we're often transferring wolves around, and but what will dictate if they're, I guess, the best release candidate will be their genetics. Both the Mexican wolf and red wolf programs have very low, very small genetic pool in terms of their founding population,
right.
And struggle today with the wild population. And also probably just their health, their behavior in terms of if they're habituated or not as a captive animal. And that's also going to hold true in terms of kind of the criteria when you're looking for breeding pairs. And that's when we're doing a lot of our kind of transferring of wolves.
Right.
Like right now for Mexican gray wolves, for example, the wild population has a mean kinship of 0.24, I think, which means they're about the equivalent of all brothers and sisters in the wild, which is kind of gross and not good.
Not good. Yeah.
Yeah, not healthy. So, so really, we're always looking for those animals to go into the wild that could somehow augment that captive or that wild
right. Genetic bottleneck.
Pools. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's how we create breeding pairs. So it's not us; they're people on a management team. They have geneticists they kind of make these love connections. And then often though, whoever's within these arranged marriages, someone might be in California and someone might be in New York. So we're going to have to be transferring them around quite a bit for that reason. So it's sometimes sad because even though these animals don't know me at all, because we don't interact with them, and they don't care about me at all. They don't want to listen to me at all. Right. I love them to death. And so it is hard to say goodbye when you see these animals, kind of chosen to be moved to a different facility. But usually it's because either they're on their way to maybe becoming a wild wolf, or they're going to have a chance to start a family. So I figure those are both pretty good things.
What else can you say about the Fish and Game and their involvement in the process? Do they assess the purity of genetics, or in trying to prevent maybe dog genetics from being introduced back into the population, or what kind of criteria are they looking for?
Yeah, so U.S. Fish and Wildlife, with both of the programs, and it involves the state agencies too. And actually for the Mexican wolf, it involves kind of the equivalent in Mexico too, which is cool. But really they're kind of they're at the lead. So we're basically almost like safeguarding these reservoirs, I guess, of these animals that can definitely keep the population going, produce animals that could go to the wild, but it's really up to them to be out there in the wild to release them, to count them, I guess, and also to work with the local communities to make sure they're okay. And there are special, I guess, designations under the Endangered Species Act that these animals have. We don't really like everything about it or the terminology because it's experimental, non-essential. But it really allows more flexibility when it comes to managing them. And managing is a euphemism sometimes. Sometimes that means putting them back in captivity or even lethal control, killing them. So one thing that we do at the Wolf Center, because not only do we believe that every wolf should be wild, we also believe they shouldn't be killed. Right. Unless it's circumstances I can't imagine. But, if it's something with conflict with livestock, that's usually the case. That we try to encourage at least bringing them back into captivity. And that's, honestly, we would encourage more just non-lethal measures and just try to coexist. And we try to make the space for those wolves because most of our wolves are off exhibit and they do eat deer. It's a little bit better than a situation, a different captive, I guess, environment. And we have welcomed a few wolves from the wild that are wild born. And as much as we loved having them there, it does break your heart to think that, as they step out of that crate, like onto New York property, that they were running free, like in the Gila wilderness. So it's a tough part about it.
So that's something we've never heard before. So that's something you try to promote is some kind of idea that if you have a wolf that you took part in reintroducing and they're getting into trouble with people or ranchers, you try to promote what would happen in that case. Like a rancher would report the wolf to Fish and Game, and then Fish and Game would tranquilize the animal and try to bring them back to your facility. And then would they be reintroduced again, or they would just be, re-immersed into the programs, or they'd be permanently captive?
So it wouldn't necessarily be one that was reintroduced. So it's any of the Mexican wolves out there.
Got it.
And this is the Mexican wolf program. It's almost like, if there is any sort of conflict, U.S. Fish and Wildlife will work with probably the rancher and try to prevent it from happening. They have different tools that they can use. But if they feel like it's something that's going to just keep on happening, or it's something where the landowner does not want to cooperate, that's where underneath this 10J designation, it does allow this management flexibility. And so we definitely encourage, don't kill anybody, at least let them come and live their lives. And at least they could contribute to the recovery, maybe breeding, or maybe even just teaching other wolves if they're introduced to another wolf, like how to be wild. These introductions aren't that easy. You'd have to probably do it in a breeding or just a male-female sort of capacity. But it's, ultimately it's, especially since a lot of the stuff is happening on public or wilderness lands.
Yeah.
It's the very least we could do.
Yeah.
I wish we could do more. Because we have one wolf right now. His name is Lighthawk. And we named him Lighthawk after there's a great volunteer aviation organization called Lighthawk. And they do all these environmental missions, including flying wolves around from facility to facility. So it was Lighthawk that brought Lighthawk to us. And it's interesting because, like I said, we don't really interact with them, but we have a really robust network of webcams. And I mean, gosh, especially during like the height of the pandemic, I was just looking at the webcams all the time just because I felt like I could just be with the wolves. But you can just tell his behavior is just, it's not like different because they don't act different with people, but it's just there's something there. And it's probably just his memory, and he's just somehow expressing that. And he has a lovely family at our place. He's fallen in love with a wolf named Trumpet. And
the inspo for the book. Yeah.
So Trumpet, this is Trumpet post puppyhood. She met a wild dude named Lighthawk. And they've had 2 litters, and actually one of their pups, who was born in 2019, was released into the wild. Wow. So it's kind of cool that Lighthawk's wild legacy continues through his daughter, who we named Hope. So we hope she's out there. She doesn't have a collar, so we don't really know, which means we can just assume the best.
I was going to ask that. So the wolves that get reintroduced from your facility or that originated from your facility, they do or don't all have collars. And you just answered that question. They don't all have collars. So some of them you just never hear from again, or you end up picking them up on trail cameras, or what kind of information have you been able to acquire, after post introduction?
No, that's a great question. And all of them except for Hope had a collar. And that's just because when Hope was released, she was just shy of 2 weeks old. Oh. So, I mean, she was, and basically what they did, I don't know if you've heard about it, it's just a cross foster when pups, like actually this is happening right now because it's puppy season and in the wild and captivity and everywhere, basically in North America. And it's, so right now we have been in touch with U.S. Fish and Wildlife about any potential Mexican wolf pups and red wolf pups at our facility. And with the Mexican wolf program, right now, they're only relying on cross foster or pup foster to get wolves back into the wild. Mm-hmm. And what that means is if it's actually Trumpet and Lighthawk again, are our one breeding pair. So if they have their 3rd litter this year, our curator will get on the phone immediately with kind of the vet and the rest of the team from U.S. Fish and Wild to let them know what's going on. They actually tune into our webcams if Trumpet chooses the den that has a camera, which she has in the past. Yeah. And then based on the size of the litter, if the wolves look healthy, they will try to see if there's a wild litter that is within a day or 2 of the captive litter's birth. So really just want them to match up, which is not that hard because they only really have a window of like April and May, basically. So, and if that's the case, depending again the size of all the litters and health, they sometimes take captive born pups, usually around 10 days old, and fly them out or drive them out wherever you are, fly in our case, out into the wilderness basically, and insert them into the den of this wild family. And normally it's more than one pup. Wow. For us, it was just a single pup that they took, and she was inserted into the den of the Saffel Pack in Arizona. So, and every year in Arizona and the Southwest, U.S. Fish and Wildlife will do a population survey to figure out how many wolves are out there, and they try to collar any like yearlings out there that are big enough for collar that they didn't, miss as pups. And so they have yet to find her because she does have a microchip like ID. Mm-hmm. So either things aren't so great for her, or she just outfoxes them every time, which I prefer, then she's still out there. So we hope to get some other, maybe some of her siblings out there. If this litter, times up well with the wild one. But really is just huge, like footsteps for such a small little being, right? And there's definitely faster, more efficient ways to kind of get their genetics into the wild gene pool than through pups, because they have to grow up and then they have to survive and then they have to reproduce. But right now, I think it's more politically palatable. So that is the only thing that U.S. Fish and Wildlife is using out there. But our other wolves, they got collars. And we have, we do get reports. And probably the best report was the very first wolf we released, which was a long time ago, was in 2006. But after she was released with her mate and her 2 young pups, so it was July, so they're just about 2 months old, we heard that they took down their first elk, which,
insane.
She's a New Yorker. She's never even seen an elk. So we're really excited for her and her family, just knowing that for the first time in their lives, there was no fences, there's no people. There was just kind of the wild landscape for them to explore and conquer.
I'm going to have to listen to this episode and see what you guys were talking about. As my internet, all the interesting stuff. It was good. I'm gonna jump in here while I can. Yeah. And Maggie, I don't know if Stephen asked this, but and something just came up too. So I love your idea that you guys have with the webcams. I think that is it's such an insight and a beautiful way for people to actually see.
We've been talking about doing that too.
Yeah, we want to do that at Wolf Connection. So hopefully, we can borrow that idea. That would be great.
Yeah.
But what is that? What was the idea behind it? And how did that get borne out? And what reactions have you seen from just the general public being able to witness them in a fairly natural environment? Because you guys do have, I think, a fairly huge facility. I don't know if Stephen asked about the layout, but what is the layout pretty much of Wolf Conservation Center and where they all are?
Yeah, I would say we're mostly enclosures. Not the best amenities for people right now. We're working on that. We wanted to conquer wolves first. They were the priority.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but like 10 different enclosures, most of them are off exhibit. And that's really what kind of started this, because with, in caring for our red wolves and Mexican wolves, we really want to interact as little as possible. Right. And taking care of animals that you rarely see is difficult. So it was probably almost 10 years ago that we first got technology has advanced so much since our first webcams. But we got our first webcams, and it was really to help us with husbandry. So we can know how they're doing, knowing if they're getting water, who's coming out for food, if they're not. And then also we could maybe see some behavior, just how kind of what the hierarchy is within the family. And we soon discovered when we made those public, what an amazing engagement tool webcams can be. I'm at the Wolf Center every day, and I'm on webcams at home every day too. So I'm not nuts, but there are a lot of other people that are nuts too. And people around the world are watching these wolves night and day. And, and I think, not really understanding, kind of the technical like requirements or needs or infrastructure that we would need to have as many webcams as we do. We really lucked out that we got away with what we did for so long, because I was like, more webcams, having no idea like what they really took to support. Luckily, we have IT support now, so we can do it much better. But we have people watching the first kind of howls of some of these pups, seeing when we have multi-generational families. So if there's multiple kind of litters living in the same, but different generations in the same family, just kind of the behaviors, how the yearlings will pitch in and help with the pup rearing, even just getting to know the wolves and their personalities. You can even see that through a lot of these cameras. And I think one story that we like to tell, just because it still blows my mind, is that it was probably a while ago, like 2016 or 17. And we have a Mexican gray wolf named Belle. They all have alphanumeric names, but it's hard to get people to fall in love with animals that sound like R2D2. But her name is F like 1226 or something. And she was going into labor in a den that had a camera. So silly us, we went on some social platform and said, hey, join critically endangered Mexican wolf Belle, like in labor right now. And like 300,000 people did. And crashed our site entirely.
Wow.
But which also like, God, that's so rude. I mean, poor Belle, right? I mean, one of the most like vulnerable moments a woman can be in, and we tell people to join her. Like, but so obviously our whole system crashed. But just to see that interest and engagement was just like, holy cow, we had no idea. And since then we just have people really write us from all over, like, I hope you know that, Diane had a little bit of a limp when she woke up, but she shook it off. We're like, okay. I mean, it's like we have so many eyes on them all the time. Wow. So it could drive you crazy, but it's really, at the end of the day, just shows you that these people care about them. They're talking about them. We have like our adoption program. So they ask questions about them. They want to know if they go to a different facility, how they're doing. So we've had to warn some of these other facilities, like if some of our wolves go to their place, like, okay, just so you know, the wolf comes with a lot of fans. So I hope you have some staff ready to answer questions because they're used to getting their information about these wolves that they're falling in love with. So, But it really is, I mean, I totally recommend webcams. And now we're just, we're always trying to, I guess, connect with new audiences. It's like everybody else. So we're streaming on Twitch now and doing all sorts of educational kind of programs there, but people are just, just a whole new like audience of wolf lovers. And they're taking action too. They'll be talking about like, yeah, isn't it great? The lawsuit reversed the delisting. Woo! Wow. But wolves in the Northern Rockies still need our help. And just seeing this when they could be doing like Fortnite. So it's just like, this is awesome. So it's just always nice, and you just learn. And I'm sure you guys see this too. Just in this type of work, you kind of learn all sorts of things that you didn't think you'd ever like know anything about.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's just cool.
We've noticed that too, even just when we started the podcast too, just the people that you meet and the people that communicate with you, like you said, I mean, the fact that you get 300,000 just on a birth is, first of all, it's so educational though too. I mean, it's invasive to a degree, and I understand that end of it, but it's also one of those things that it's bringing this community more together, that people are like, wow, this really is a massive issue, and this is, hopefully people are behind this species being, and understanding that that's an important thing. So we get that 100%.
Yeah, no, the point I was going to make is it seems just like a next level. I mean, when we talk to folks about the beauty of educating kids, adults, whoever, just folks who don't get a lot of opportunity to see wolves in the wild, which most people don't, even people who live in states where there are wolves, is that it somehow trickles down into real life conservation, because it's creating a generation of people who potentially at least have been exposed enough to wolf behavior or wolf photos or wolf videos, the least that we can do. And it creates some kind of tangible effect. But this thing where they can watch remotely, I mean, on a video camera, it just seems like the culmination of all of those ideas and just the best of it. It's such a clever idea. And I think it really effectively does that thing that education is supposed to do, which is it creates like, a personal stake in the game, enough personal relationship for them to genuinely care about what happens. And I think that's a really cool thing.
If you care about something, that's a big thing, and you could do so much more for them afterwards. No, it is. It's great. I mean, you guys are doing, is that, obviously that's an education arm. And again, if I'm repeating, I apologize. Is there, what are the other tactics or information sessions that you guys do? Because I know you have some stuff I think you have some stuff on site. Do you go out into schools? Do you go out into big
auditoriums, and what are the other ways that you're educating along with the webcams and having people being able to see them on an everyday basis?
So we obviously have our on-site like educational programs, and like everything we do is the only thing that doesn't have like an educational component is probably our photo session programs, but they always end up being educational because people ask questions and we're like, oh, we're happy to tell you everything. But we used to do a lot of off-site programs, really through and with kind of like, he was like the CEO of the Wolf Conservation Center, and he was a wolf named Atka. And I, when I first came to the Wolf Center, it was 2005, so a long time ago. And I'd met, those few wolves that I talked to and got me into wolves. And I came, and then I saw this wolf walking on a leash and going to schools and music. And I was like, what is going on? I couldn't believe that wolves would do this. It just totally blew my mind. And I was like, who are these people? What are they doing? And Atka, God, really, I think through this amazing wolf and boss and friend and everything else, he really kind of helped us carry our message beyond the gates of the Wolf Center. And it's almost like it was pre-internet practically. So it was like he was our only kind of like vector to get out there. Mm-hmm. And he used to take us to such fun places. He went to Washington, D.C. a number of times. He's actually marked the halls of Congress twice. But he always went, with the introduction of some sort of wolf protection or law. So he was kind of, working really hard, whether he was educating people about the importance of his wildkin or, trying to educate members on Congress about why they should pass certain legislation to protect habitat or, other wolf populations. He was a hustler, and he did it for many years. He actually just passed away in 2000. I say just because obviously I'm not over it, but in 2018, and he was 16 and a half years old. And wow. And the craziest thing is with Atka, we first of all, we got him a driver's license when he was 16. I still have a copy in my wallet. I don't know what I'm planning to achieve with it, but just in case some cop thinks it's cute. But when he was 15, we got him an email account. And obviously he's not on email or wasn't on email, but we thought it would be really fun to give people an opportunity to write to Atka. And, at this point, his fan base was just enormous because he was on webcam too. So this is like, and just people just, loved him. And the emails we would get for Atka were the sweetest notes ever, because they weren't asking you like, is there a rain date, or can I have a refund, or do you have room for 2 more people, or what do you think of this or that? It was just pure. They were talking to a wolf, right? They're having this wolf listen, and it was Atka. So some of the people were saying, God, I met you when I was in 4th grade, and now I'm a wolf biologist in China, something crazy. Wow. And some people were like, I've never met you. I know I never will meet you, but you changed the way I feel about blah, 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 blah. So, they were just the sweetest messages. And really, we just think about him, all the time. I'm getting like teary-eyed just talking about him. So sorry, it's been a while since I've talked about him.
It's like you said in the beginning, and like Stephen and I have had, the whole time we've been connected with Wolf Connection, is that these relationships and these bonds, they last forever. They just do. And there are wolves that I interact with on a daily basis when Stephen comes back and he films, and they're there. They're always going to be there. And it's a lot of it is the reflection of ourselves in them that we see. And it's some of it's the good parts, some of it's the bad parts. And it's just balancing that and recognizing that, some of these relationships I have with the 4-legged are better than the ones I have with 2-legged. It just happens the way it goes. So I hear you 100%. And trust me, we've lost some in the past that have they burn forever. And it hurts. It hurts, but it makes you remember the memories that are so good about all that stuff.
Totally. I think the hardest part is also telling people, because so many other people are in love. So you're just like, oh no, we're going to break a lot of hearts with this news. But yeah, so his spirit still lives on. I mean, he's the core of the Wolf Center. And so I really went on a tangent. Sorry. We still do a lot of offsite programming, but it's none of it with a wolf. So it's just our team of human educators. So we do that. We've actually been able to kind of exercise our virtual muscle over the past 2 years. So we've done a lot of kind of virtual programming. And it's funny because it was probably like 2 years before COVID, we started a webinar series. And we got kind of burnt out during COVID. So we're back and up and running, but a scientific webinar series where we kind of do kind of next level and really want to connect whoever our presenter is. So, whatever that research is, but help them kind of translate it and bring it to the public. So it's not only people that have these scientific publications that can read these papers and understand them, but have this kind of interaction between just, whether they're just a lay person, but sometimes they're just people that are also students, or even they work in the agencies and they're curious about a lot of stuff. So that's been a really fun experience too with our webinars.
Yeah, I that to me is so unique. It's so thoughtful though, because we need, especially because we're all in this space, is everyone needs to be able to read literature and understand what's happening. It can't just be, and we've had biologists and scientists come on and speak with Stephen and I that say the same thing. They go, I can write this wonderful paper that I spent years of my life on, but only a certain cohort of the community will truly understand it. And that's why the things that you all are doing there between, like you did the webinars and you have the tours and you do the webcams, and this is bringing in, like you say, the lay people so they can form that bond and that connection, and then go off and do hopefully their own research and come back with their own ideas and their own ways of how they can do conservation, just like you did, just how you started out. I mean, you circled all the way around and came back. So, I mean, all that stuff is so vitally important. I mean, you guys are doing awesome work with that. I mean, I can't say that enough.
We're learning every day too. So, I mean, that's kind of the beauty that there's new stuff and even just, some of it has like some sort of, purpose in terms of like making sure they keep, remain protected. But then some of it's just pure curiosity about like, what wolves are doing in the summertime. Do they eat fruit? So it's just kind of a nice kind of balance of just kind of being a curious scientist or sometimes looking for those scientific nuggets that you need to support a case.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what's the future? What are the goals for you guys going forward? Could you have all these wonderful ideas? You've implemented a lot of them. What's the future? What are the next 5 years or so out for WCC? What do you guys plan on doing?
Well, we definitely are going to be continuing what we're doing, right? So looking to protect and preserve wolves in North America. Honestly, what we're focused on probably the most right now is upgrading our campus. It's not very sexy, but it will be fun. And it will look really cool. We have some cool things working out. We've been fundraising really just for a capital campaign to create this really neat education center. It'll have an exhibit space and really interactive learning opportunities. And also, we don't, right now we have porta pots. Like I said, the wolves we're really good at. So we want to kind of bring 100%. The campus up to the scope of our work. But I think the coolest thing, and something that I think a lot of our supporters have been most excited about, because we have a program called Sleeping with Wolves, which we had no idea how popular it was going to be when we decided, like, hey, do you think people want to camp out here? And they do. And so we have, and really because we're close to New York City, we have people from all over the world come to these programs because they kind of build it into their itinerary if they're visiting New York. And so, but they just camp out in regular, like 4-person tents. And we do it on the weekends, like starting soon all the way throughout summer. And, but we're going to have kind of these wolf pod den things, little cabins basically, and to really extend that season throughout the year, and also not have to worry about weather and everything else. So still going to have the camping with tents available too, because I like to tell like fellow city folk that it's kind of like a good intro to camping, right? Because you're right, it's not that rugged. But now we can kind of go a little glamping too. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and just really just try to work and give everyone and empower people to use their voice to protect wolves. Because as you know, this past year has been not the best year for wolves.
Yeah.
And before that wasn't, it'd be nice for wolves to be able to sleep easy and just worry about the natural challenges to being a wild wolf, which is like hunting, finding a mate, caring for your family, protecting your territory, defending your territory from neighboring wolf families, and not, snaring and baiting and shooting and traps, because I think that's the 21st century and we should be beyond that.
Yeah. I mean, we've collectively, I think we've gotten to a point where there's people on both sides that are pro-wolf and some that are not so pro-wolf, but they understand, I think, the natural ecological balance is sort of shifted in a way that's not healthy. And so and again, I think it's places like Wolf Conservation Center, the things that we've been doing on this podcast that, again, we've talked to people that I don't think we would have ever spoken to, just in normal conversation. So I think anything these avenues can do is just, it's serving for them. And that's, I think, the main point of what we're trying to do here. So it's great. Everything you guys are doing is awesome. Before I get to websites and everything where people can follow you, because you guys have a great following, last question that we ask everyone is, when you hear the word wolf, what is the thing that comes to your mind?
Oh gosh, just strong and wild, right? That's what I think of. And who doesn't want to be strong and wild? So we like to challenge people, like, just try to be like a wolf. And, they can figure out what that means, but maybe that means just being loyal or cooperative or vocal. But yeah, I think it's a good thing to be. So strong and wild.
I love that. So Maggie, tell everybody the website, the socials, where they can, can they ride any wolves? I know you got a lot there. So yeah, give everybody the places to find you and communicate with WCC.
Awesome. So our website is just NY as in New York, wolf.org. Pretty easy. And on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. Actually, we during the pandemic, we surpassed our first 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Oh wow!
So we have a
nice.
We're influencers. Woo!
All right.
But anyway, all those places, just look for Wolf Conservation Center. And definitely on our website, you can find those webcams. And it is a good time to start watching, because we think we have 2 potential litters come end of this month, beginning of May. So there could be little red wolf pups or little Mexican wolf pups. So some good stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah, everybody go check that out. Actually, one last question to the last question. I don't know if you guys covered this while I was offline. When is the next, do you guys have a scheduled next release of the next litter of pups, or when's the next schedule for that?
So right now, it really depends on the timing and the number of pups and all that stuff. But there is potential for one or more of our Mexican gray wolf pups that'll be born soon to actually become a wild wolf pup within the first 2 weeks
Unreal.
of his or her life. So, and the good thing is, obviously, I think like, because Trumpet would be the mom, like, what about Trumpet's feelings,
Right.
And it's true because, hello, wolves tend to be a little bit hardier than humans, but I'm sure she would miss one of her newborns. But sometimes wild wolf would come back to the captivity as well. So we might even have a different pup come and join her. So we'll see. It really just shows you kind of the micromanagement that we've gotten to in order to save these species. What would be much easier is if we had not, killed them to, near extinction in the first place.
Exactly.
So we have to thank Trumpet and Lighthawk and all of, 32 wolves at the Wolf Center for unknowingly doing so much to help their wild brothers and sisters.
Man, no, you guys are doing such an awesome job. And you're a pin in the map for Stephen and I.
Yeah,
So
worth mentioning too, Trumpet has to be, it's got to be top 3 names for an animal ever.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and the weird thing about Trumpet, she was an only child and loud, and poor mom and dad. Wolves aren't supposed to have only children. They need to play, that's a lot of work for mom and dad. But yeah, Trumpets, she's awesome. And so we're crossing our fingers, toes, paws, that she has puppies and that she has a lot of fun with it.
No, we'll check out those webcams and everybody go over to WCC. And again, it's nywolf.org. Check them out. Maggie Howell, just awesome to have you on here. Of course, you have Howell in your in your name there at the end. Thank you for all that you do, and you are welcome back anytime. You guys have any new updates, you come to Stephen and I, and we'll put it out in the universe for you. So
thank you so much. Really
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Howell's to everybody out there, and Stephen, I'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Looking to support Wolf Connection or sponsor one of the wolves in our pack? Just go to wolfconnection.org, click on the donate tab, and find out more information.